we're in such a bubble.
Yeah.
You know, we're kept away, we're locked away, we're always rehearsing. And when it came time, you know, to be off the show, it was so different.
Was it being let down? Because I've talked to a lot of Idol participants, and they felt like they were just, you know, sailing at 30,000 feet, and all of a sudden, free fall.
Not at all. The thing about after getting, you know, released into the wilderness, so to speak, as you were saying, most people get, you know, feel like they're getting dropped down. I really felt lifted up. I've gotten to see the effect that I'm having on people and on people's lives. How I'm, you know, making them happier, or making them cry when I did this, or, you know, giving them, you know, conveying all this emotion through these songs, and having Tourette's and Asperger's and being open about it has really, you know, allowed people to be themselves.
No, you've had a very. In fact, we're gonna a little later see some footage of a young girl who said it was meeting you was the most important and highlight of her life, biggest day of her life. So we're gonna look at that footage in a few minutes. But before we get into that, and before we get into your life, I want people at home to understand what these different conditions are that we're talking about here, because I want to be very, very accurate about this. Now, Asperger's is a let's say a lesser version, sort of autistic spectrum disorder. It's actually a diagnosis that's going to be eliminated when the DSM-5 comes out. DSM-4 and DSM-5 are the diagnostic manuals that doctors use to make mental health diagnoses. And they're really going to talk about Asperger's as more of a spectrum, lesser spectrum disorder. What we think of it as high-functioning autism, with the primary issue being difficulty in reading social cues. Would that be what you have there, James? Are you aware that there's some difficulty in sort of what my patients with this syndrome usually talk about is difficulty in reading the nuances, the ebbs and flows of social environments. Like when a room suddenly erupts in laughter, you might not have been at that same place as the rest of the room.
Yeah, it's a little different for me. In that sense, I'm sometimes the first one to laugh,
right,
even when it's not funny.
Right.
You know, and there's a bit of social awkwardness there. I've kind of, you wouldn't think it by seeing me on the show.
Right, because I mean, when you've performed, there's absolutely zero evidence of any of this.
Exactly, but when they start talking to me after the song, I've said some pretty awkward things.
Is that because Tourette's or the Asperger's? Because Tourette's, sometimes you'll blurt out things you don't really mean to have publicly said.
You know, that's a common misconception about Tourette's. You know, and only about 4 or 5%
have the vocalizations.
Right. Which is, the term is coprolalia.
That's correct. And have you ever seen the translation of coprolalia? The actual literal translation?
No.
We'll talk about it out the air. Let's define Tourette's for people at home again. The symptoms often occur early in childhood, which I imagine they started with you. What age?
I was diagnosed when I was 10.
With Tourette's?
Yes.
How about the
Asperger's?
So at age 10.
Same time.
All right, so it's motor or vocal tics that last more than a year, simple tics many times, or complex motor tics. In other words, small facial tics, or even large body movements. You have both, or one or the other?
Small body movements. Sometimes it's jerking my head. Mostly facial and vocal. Sometimes I get this somewhat OCD a little bit thing where...
Well, Tourette's is on the spectrum with OCD, isn't it? Yeah, it's a spectrum of that. These all kind of blend from one to the other. There's not a discrete, cutoff where, hey, it's just Asperger's or just autism or just Tourette's or just OCD. They're just related ADHD, disorders.
Yeah, everything's kind of blended into one, and I find myself, sometimes I have to do things, but most of the time I can't control it.
It's like, you told me off there, it's like a hiccup.
Yeah.
It's like having hiccups.
Yeah.
And so how has the experience of American Idol contributed to maybe you dealing with this or being of service to others with this similar condition?
Wow. Being on the show and being on Idol is a whole nother spectrum to what I'm used to. I'm used to being at home, being in my comfort zone, being with my family.
By family, you mean your family of origin, or have you formed a family? You have a son, right?
Yeah, my son and my fiance.
So that's, by you mean family, do you mean those two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Living, and being with them, and there's no stress. But as soon as I come on the show, you know, suddenly there's this whole new everything,
Yeah.
you know, and it's stressful. So to cope with that was probably the hardest thing, you know, coping with this new time of getting up really early, you know, having to go to bed early, or just get used to going to bed late and getting 4 hours of sleep. You know, sometimes that's what it was, 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, getting used to that, and no sleep and the stress that comes with it.
You're 22 years old now, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Your fiance is a bit older?
31.
31. How'd you guys meet?
Our moms were friends at church when I was 4 and she was 13.
Nice.
And so we both, after that, kind of went and lived our lives. And
Does she share your love of music?
yes.
Is it hard to be away from them, though?
It really is, yeah. And I got to go home for a week. I hadn't been home since February.
Wow.
I got to go home.
Now here's
weeks
where the
ago.
Asperger's can sort of get in the way here. Is your fiance having trouble with that distance? Yeah, and you may not read that stress on her. You know what I mean?
It definitely is.
She has to tell you. She has to be clear with you if
Yeah.
that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Can you understand that?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Everything from my Asperger's to Tourette's has actually gotten a little lighter, so to speak, since I've been a kid.
So it was worse when you were a lot younger.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. And you had a pretty rough childhood, I guess. Your dad was a drug addict, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And he died of addiction?
He died of a heroin overdose, relapse, when I was 9.
Did it have an impact on you think? I mean, sometimes it's not very pleasant to have a drug-addicted parent. I mean, kids feel all that.
He wasn't really around because my parents were split up.
So it didn't have
And he was a musician, so he was off away on the other side of the country for most of my life. So all in all, I only, from what I remember, spent 3 or 4 days with him.
And when we come back.